My name's Kate. I'm Kyle's wife. Kyle was the kindest, loveliest human being that you could ever meet. He was also the most laid-back human being you could ever meet. He never complained about anything. He was always so positive, and everybody loved him. He was so kind, so positive, very competitive, hardworking, such a good friend. He had so many friends. Just the best husband, and most importantly, just the most wonderful dad. Me and Kyle met when I worked in a bar. He used to come in there. It's actually a snooker club. I worked there as like a second job. Kyle was a very shy person, never spoke to me while I worked there. And I'd always admired Kyle from afar. He was a bit older than me, so I knew who he was in school. He didn't know who I was. And he eventually messaged me on Facebook and asked me out, and the rest, as they say, is history. I think our wedding day was a perfect day. I think it was whatever every little girl imagines it will be, and it was exactly that. Perfect white wedding, horse and carriage. We had our son Roman before we got married, so both the children were there, my stepson Leighton as well. Just a perfect day. Typical Kyle, didn't do a speech, I did the speech. Just everything we could have imagined it to be. Nothing I would have changed about it. Perfect. Kyle started to develop pains in his chest, towards his neck, in that area, probably about 18 months before he was diagnosed. He visited the doctors many times with these pains, and because he was so into his sports, the gym, it was always thought it was muscular injuries. He would get the pain, but it would probably be worse at night, and in the morning when he woke up, and during exercise or just anything that would put pressure on that part of his body. It seemed to get worse as time went by. Sometimes it wouldn't be as bad, sometimes it would be worse. It was mainly just the pain in that area. Kyle was diagnosed with Osteosarcoma, which is a bone tumour. The tumour actually started in his first rib, which is actually up here, your first rib, just under your clavicle. It extended into his second rib, which is just a little bit below there. And it had moved into the base of his neck and towards his spine. So it was involved in his spine. That's the word they used at the time, which we didn't realise actually meant was in his spine. We were actually told at diagnosis that it couldn't be operated upon. And that is what you do for osteosarcoma. You remove the tumour, you have to remove the tumour. And we were told at diagnosis that would not be possible because of where it was. Kyle had something called MAP chemotherapy, which is a combination of 3 different drugs. He had treatment for, it was a 5-week cycle. He would have his treatment for 3 weeks out of that cycle, and it's inpatient chemotherapy, which isn't something that we were prepared for. But anybody that's had this type of chemotherapy knows only too well. You spend a lot of time in hospital going through this treatment. So you would have one different type of drug 1 week, ideally come home. That didn't always happen. And then have 2 weeks of the other drug. You then hopefully get 2 weeks at home, and then you're back at home in hospital again. This never happened. Kyle would always be back in hospital, either with an infection, a temperature, or just because he was so poorly. He just really couldn't tolerate the chemotherapy very well. He had 4 cycles of this. We then took Kyle to Austria. We fundraised for a special type of radiotherapy for Kyle, and we took him to complete this. We were there for 7 weeks. Kyle couldn't have surgery which is why we did this. He was told that at diagnosis. So we looked for anything we could try and do as an alternative to that, and that's what we did. We did that. It was, so we thought, as successful as it could have been. We had a nice time while we were there, actually. It wasn't on chemotherapy, so we were able to spend a little bit of time as a family there, which is something we just couldn't do at home while he was having chemotherapy. We got back. He started on his 5th cycle of MAP and came into hospital with a suspected infection. Had a CT scan, and we were told that the cancer had spread at that point to his spine. It was at that point he was then switched to the 2nd line chemotherapy. It's called IFOS and ETOP for short. He had 2 cycles of this. That didn't work either. He was then put on tablet chemotherapy, regorafenib it's called, to be precise. That didn't work either. Kyle was always keen to try whatever he could, but nothing worked. And then September, 1 year after he was diagnosed, he died. When Kyle was diagnosed, I stopped working so that I could look after Kyle and take him back and forth to hospital and just be with him when he needed me, which was every day. The biggest impact it had on our family life is that we didn't have a family life. He was in hospital all the time. We didn't take the children there because it just wasn't anyone that's been on a chemotherapy ward or a ward in a hospital like the Christie knows. It's not somewhere you want to take your children. So Kyle hardly saw his children. I think the hardest part about the way they treat osteosarcoma or other types of bone cancer is how awful and brutal the chemotherapy is. Means that you can't spend quality time with your family because you're in hospital or you're just too poorly to do that. So I would say that's the hardest thing about the treatment, is that it just does not allow for any family time at all. The most difficult part of Kyle's journey for me was watching the person you love and care about most in the world go through something so awful and feeling completely powerless to help them or make them better, and just knowing what he was facing and trying to be strong for him and for our children was the most difficult thing. So something that me and Kyle talked about a lot when we knew that Kyle was going to die was moving forward with the kids, and something that the most important thing to him was that the kids always felt supported and loved. And that is my hope for the future, that I bring the boys up exactly the way that their dad would have wanted me to, and that they never go without love, because they've lost such a huge person in their lives that loved them so much. Actually, the most important thing to Kyle was that they never felt that moving forward. So that's the most important thing for me. If my children are happy in the future, then I've done my job. I've done what Kyle wanted. Yeah. Going through this with Kyle highlighted to me what an awful disease this is. And I've met so many other families, mainly mothers like me, that have young teenage sons and daughters And that's been as heartbreaking as watching Kyle go through this, because I'm a mother too. And another thing that I promised Kyle and he wanted me to do was to raise awareness for this awful disease and to help in any way that I can, because I don't want other people to go through what Kyle did or what I go through every day or my children do. And I don't want mothers to say goodbye to their children. So that is what I plan to do in the future. After losing somebody, and especially losing somebody after primary bone cancer, it's not just the loss of the person that you're dealing with, it's the trauma of what you've been through during treatment with them. And I think a lot of people don't understand that because they're not in your bubble of your treatment bubble, your cancer bubble, whatever you want to call it. They don't get that. It's horrendous, like what you've watched them have done to their body, and try to support them through. And I'm still, I still struggle to think about that part of it now, not just the fact that he died. It was just barbaric what he went through. And I think it's really important that people acknowledge that it's not just the loss, it's all of the trauma before the loss too. And it's really important to connect with other people that know how you feel. Take the time to talk about it. See a counsellor. I have a counsellor. I still speak to them now. I don't know where I would be without that. Like, it's just been so helpful to me. Trying to find something that gives you a bit of a release. Some form of exercise is what's worked for me. Getting myself outside. Finding something that you enjoy doing, because it's really important that you find something you enjoy doing, because you deserve to smile and be happy. Nobody deserves to feel miserable all the time. That's not what Kyle would have wanted. It's not what anybody's loved one wants. How can you move forward and be the best version of yourself for your family that are left, in my case, my children, if I'm a miserable, broken shell of a person? I can't be. And probably just the most important thing that I try to tell myself is that I feel this huge loss and the grief is so heavy because I loved him so much, and that came first. So I will take the grief and I will carry it, because I will always have the love.